Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8 minutes before 8, more of my conversation with Azim Rafiq, the former Yorkshire player, in the next hour, and we'll come back to your views on the jail terms for the Insulate Britain protesters. Let's catch up now with other stories with Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who joins me now. The debate that we had yesterday and the vote, is the sleaze row now done and over in your view, Deputy Prime Minister? Good morning.
Well, I think there is always an ongoing impetus and need to make sure we retain and build on public confidence in the political system. But the critical thing yesterday is that the Prime Minister and the government intervened with two principles that the House of Commons endorsed. You cannot be and we'll introduce rules so that you cannot be a paid lobbyist or consultant in the political realm, so in effect trading off your position as an MP. And secondly, that there needs to be a limit, some common sense limits on the overall amount of outside interests that you can engage in whilst being an MP, so that you're focused on serving your constituents. The Committee on Standards will take that forward. It's not kicked into the long grass, far from it. They will report according to the resolution we passed yesterday in January, and that allows us, I think, to deal with this issue and get on with talking about the things that I think most voters expect us to be dealing with, including things like the rail infrastructure projects that we've announced today to deal with interconnectivity, businesses, passengers in the North and the Midlands.
OK, just last question on that. The Prime Minister said that he crashed the car into the ditch over Sleaze. Were you in the front passenger seat when that happened?
Well, I think we're all in it together.
Well, you're the Deputy Prime Minister. Presumably you were on his left and as you careered off.
I take full responsibility, as we do in government. We've got collective responsibility, but fundamentally we're fixing this problem now.
Are you, though, Mr. Raab? Because it is reported that fewer than 10 MPs will actually be affected. That's what's being reported, Mr. Raab.
Well, I don't. All MPs will be covered by this. Every single one will be covered by a bar on acting as paid political consultants or lobbyists, and a limit so that outside interests don't eclipse the overriding focus that should be on serving constituency priorities. So everyone will be covered by that. And of course, it is for the Committee on Standards to work up the detail of that. It is not actually for the government to do that. The House comes up with these rules, but what we've given, and the House of Commons backed the resolution overwhelmingly, is the two key elements that now must be fixed with detailed regulation.
All right. A couple of other matters while I have the benefit of you on the line. The problem with migrant crossings, you've probably seen the numbers. 23,000 have taken the perilous journey across the Channel so far this year. The number who've been returned, 5. Why such an abject failure?
Well, first of all, we have stopped, so prevented from coming, 19,000. There have been 65 convictions for the criminals who feed on this appalling, miserable trade. The Home Secretary was speaking to her opposite number just this week. They're jointly determined to prevent all crossings. And we're looking at resolving and reforming the asylum system. You'll have seen the reports in the papers. We're also looking to work with our international partners to deal with these problems outside of the UK, outside of Europe, to reduce the pull factor. We're doing absolutely everything we can on it.
Well, respectfully, somebody's not doing what they can, because to return 5 from 23,000 is I refer you again to my original question, is an abject failure, isn't it, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, so first of all, in terms of the most important thing,
will you agree that number is not acceptable?
Well, if we prevented them coming in the first place, yes, actually the returns would be less relevant. I agree with you. Returns is an important tool that we need to
and you
look
agree
at.
5 out of 22,000 is woeful.
Well, I'm not sure whether those numbers stand up. What I would say,
well, they come from Mr. Pursglove, your colleague.
What I would say, well, it depends what you're precisely what you're looking at. No, Tom Pursglove is an excellent colleague.
I'm sure he is.
Nick, let me answer the question. The two things we're looking at in terms of our ability to return are the asylum system. The Home Secretary is reinforcing that so it's stronger. And as you know, I'm looking at the human rights system, the underlying human rights framework, to make sure that we can return those that we need to. We want a system that's firm but fair.
Right.
And I think I think that's what most asylum seekers want. They do not want to see the systems abused.
Do you think most asylum seekers want to go to Albania? Have you seen this idea that ministers are hoping to seal a deal under which arrivals on Kent coast would be taken to Albania within 7 days, where they will be, quotes, processed. Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, as usual, that's a rather selective account of...
Well, I'm so grateful I've got you to get the truth. What is the truth, sir?
Absolutely.
Here we go. Come on, Mr.
As
Raab.
always.
Come on, Deputy Prime Minister. What is
So there's two things. First of all, you're always better off dealing with the flow of migrants from a crisis or a conflict in the region itself. Our overwhelming focus is on that. It's better for migrants. It's better to be resettled and relocated nearer to your home. But to the extent that we get this flow over to the UK, we need to reduce the pull factor, and we will work with all of our partners.
Right.
So it's not just one country. We've looked at the Australian experience. We've been talking with the Danes about this, who are looking at the same way. And we want to make sure that the processing, if it's possible, and that will depend on the goodwill and the cooperation with partners, can be done elsewhere. And we make no apology for at least trying to look at that, because it would.
So it is
the
odd.
pull
We
factor.
might be sending folk to, and I know to other countries, possibly Rwanda as well. So we might be sending these folk for processing in Albania, Rwanda, and other parts of the globe.
Well, let me avoid talking about individual countries, but just to say with international partners, this is something that we are probing, because we want to test the idea, because we will do everything we can to resolve this problem.
And it will cost £100,000 per head per asylum seeker, is that correct?
And I don't recognise that number.
What is the number?
And well, look, until you've got a detailed agreement with a particular country, I don't think we'd be in a position to cost it. That is precisely why we will engage with those countries around the world that can give us, who are willing to have that further discussion. Then we would work out the detail if there's scope for progressing it.
You mentioned, and we should return to, because it's a big day as regards public transport today, there's an announcement of a multi-billion-pound project. Some people, Deputy Prime Minister, are saying that most of the tens of billions of pounds are being spent on HS2. Not enough is going elsewhere, and it's not levelling up in the north. Mr. Raab.
I don't agree with that. It's £96 billion of investment. It will link not just the rest of the country with the Midlands and the North and and those regions, but it will also critically be focused on the interconnectivity between the towns, the cities of those regions, which is what we know many of the small businesses and many of the passengers, the commuters, want to see.
But I note that of that 96 billion that you refer to, Mr. Raab, 56 is already going to HS2. So that, I mean, these are vast sums of money. That leaves just 40, I could live off it, just 40 billion.
40 billion.
A cool 40 billion for your other ambitions. Candidly, is that enough, or is too much going to HS2?
No, the HS2 is important. It deals with capacity and the national links between London and the rest of the country and the Midlands and the North. But what is also supplementing that, and you're right to break it down the way you did, is the critical importance of the money that is going into the interconnectivity region-wide. And for folks listening to this, what that means is the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses whose markets depend for expansion on those kind of connections. That's where the investment will go. Because, yes, nationwide or indeed international links are very important. But for many of those businesses, what they want to do is expand their regional market. This focus on regional interconnectivity will deliver that.
OK. And lastly, the jail terms that were handed out to the Insulate Britain protesters yesterday. Actually, I'm so sorry, should I be calling you Deputy Prime Minister or Justice Secretary? There's a line there that you prefer one of the titles. Was that story true last week, that I can only address you as Deputy Prime Minister? Or can I call you Secretary of State as well, Mr. Raab?
Or Dom is just fine, Nick.
Well, I couldn't possibly do that. Mr. Raab, I'll certainly do that, or at least
Okay,
I'll go for Dominic. How about that? I feel more comfortable with Dominic. Dominic, were the jail terms long enough?
Well, look, I don't opine on individual sentences. That's for the courts to do. But I think it's quite right when people engage in that kind of disruption affecting the public. That's not the right way to express yourself. We have got a proud tradition of freedom of expression, but disrupting, sabotaging the rest of the public is not the way to go about it. So I fully respect the judgments that were handed down.
Grateful for your time this morning, Dom. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Dominic Raab appearing here on LBC at 1 minute after 8. News is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at